ever think to yourselves that sometimes Denzel Washington might be secretly scrolling a Facebook timeline and he sees a meme and his face is attached to a quote that wasn't correctly attributed to him, and he says to himself, man, I would never say no dumb shit like that. Just me? Anyway, what is good people? You are now listening to another episode of Since We Last Spoke with Danny Foxworth. I am your humble narrator, Danny Foxworth, and it's great to be back. And on this episode, just some random thoughts and some childhood stories and some things that have, some interesting things that have taken place since the last time I recorded. So, number one, about 3 weeks ago, I took a trip down to Jacksonville, Florida to link up with my guy, Joe, Mr. Jefferson. He is the owner of a shop down in Jacksonville called The Safe House. Make sure you follow. Well, he has a new IG page. It's called The New Safe House Jacks. And he's also one third of one of my favorite podcasts, Random Acts of Podcasts. And all of the rugs that are in this room, he's pretty much had his hand in all of those rugs. I bought 4 from him. And then he also does rug making classes, or tufting, if you will. And I tried my hand at making 2 rugs on my own. So it was always good to go back down and chop it up with him. And we just basically hung out there the majority of the afternoon and, you know, talking about life stuff, what's going on in each other's lives. And he was like, do you have an idea for what kind of rug you want to make? And I was like, nah. And he's like, you know, why don't you make a rug for your pocket with your podcast logo? I'm like, that's a great idea. So we fired up the computer, and he got the logo down and put it on the projector and traced it out on the I don't know what you call it. It's like it's almost like it's like a felt. Well, not really felt. I can't remember the name of the material, but it's a layout, and you just trace the logo. And then you take the tufting gun with the yarn and you go to work. And I've made a rug once on my own once before, back in, it was either March or April when I went down there. No, it might have been February when I went down there. And it took me a while to get the hang of it. But this time, it was like riding a bicycle. Once I found my groove, it was off to the races. And it's a good way to waste a few hours of your day. You know, just chopping it up with my homie and, you know, getting my chops up with the tufting. And I was pleased with the results, considering that this is the second time that I've ever made a rug on my own. I was pleased. And again, big shout out to Joe. He could not have been more hospitable. And before I left, I had to buy another rug from him to support the cause. And again, Joe, I appreciate you. And shout out to Random Acts of Podcast. Make sure y'all check them out as well. Then on Tuesday night, I had the pleasure of going to a concert at the Charleston Poorhouse, which featured, well, Talib Kweli and my guy Skyzoo and some other local acts that I'll get into as well. But the day of the event, I'm at work, and out of nowhere, Skyzoo hits me up. And he's like, bro, do you have any more of those long ridge shirts laying around in your house? Because the last time he had performed at the Poorhouse back in 2019 when he was touring to promote the album he did with Pete Rock called Retropolitan. And I made a shirt with the word Long Ridge on it that I wore to the event, and he took a liking to it. And so much so that I actually made him his own shirt to give to him. Well, and I mailed it to him. And he said, I was going to wear that shirt that you gave to me, but I left it at the house. Do you have any more shirts that say Long Ridge on it? I was like, yeah, I got you, man. No worries. He was like, man, good looking out, bet. And so I pull up to the event, and sure enough, I meet him there, and I hand him the shirt. He normally wears a t-shirt, large size t-shirt. I wear extra large. So I would have my fingers crossed that it would fit him the way that he needed it to. And lo and behold, he goes back to his dressing room, and when it's time to hop out on stage and perform, there he is wearing my shirt, and you could not wipe the smile off my face. But prior to him performing, there were a couple of other opening acts. So shout out to DJ Scribb, based out of Charleston, man. He's a phenomenal DJ. He really had that crowd turned up. And then the first act, it was actually a four-piece band, a four-piece hip-hop band based out of Athens, Georgia, called Trevi and the Enemy. And I knew nothing about them. And the rapper, well, the frontman of the band is this rapper by the name of Trevi. It's Trvy. And at first glance, you're like, man, what is this dude on? Because he's just like a, kind of portly white dude. Yeah, when you see him, the first thing you wouldn't think is he's a rapper, but can't judge a book by its cover, because that man's presence was, their performance really blew my mind. That man has such a commanding presence, and he just great crowd participation, got out in the crowd, got off the stage and got into the crowd and performed. And that man's breath control is crazy. I walked away thoroughly impressed with them. So big shout out to Trevi and the Enemy, again, based out of Athens, Georgia. And after the show, the next day I went and checked out their music, and it's just really great product. Then the next act that came on was my guy Art Dada. I had never seen him perform live. I'm a big fan of his work. He's a rapper based out of Charleston. And this was my first time watching him perform, and he tore the stage down too. And man, I walked away thoroughly impressed with him as well. And his songs pop up in my head randomly the following day at work. And man, if you don't know anything about Art Dada, you got to get familiar, because that man is super talented. It's RDOTTA. And his latest project is called Call Me Dot 2. So make sure y'all check that out. And then the next act was a guy who also was a part of the show, the Skyzoo headline back in 2019 that I mentioned. And he's a guy by the name of Landon Wordswell, who actually just recently signed the Skyzoo's label. I think he's based out of St. Louis, but that man is a technician with them words. He kind of reminds me of Tech Nine with the vocabulary and the cadence. Just really, really, really impressed with him. And while that was going on, there was a super drunk, older white, like super duper, are you into hip hop kind of guy right there in the front row, a few people down from me. And it was just really interesting watching the transformation go from sober to just like super, like duper huggy frat boy drunk. It got to the point where during Landon Wordswell's set, the guy dapped when Landon Wordswell up. And after he dapped him, he like kissed his hand. And the look on Landon's face, he was just like, all right, bro. Like, he was super weirded out by it, which I 100% understand. And after his set was over, then Skyzoo comes out wearing a long red shirt, and I'm cheesing from ear to ear, and he's just going through the hits. Does Straight Drop. He does Range Rover Rhythm. He did my favorite song, which was Luxury, featuring Westside Gun on the hook. And then my other favorite song by Skyzoo, which he actually performed a cappella, was his song Homegrown off the aforementioned Pete Rock and the joint album that he did with Pete Rock called Retropolitan. And he was super impressive. But I mean, that goes without saying. I've seen him quite a few times. And then he leaves, and then surprise guest J Live shows up. Another one of my favorite rappers who actually lives in Charleston now. So he gets on stage and he performs. I cannot remember the same name of the song for the life of me, but the song that where he's rapping and he's DJing at the same time and cutting the records up. That never gets old. It just takes me back to the college days whenever, like the first time I heard that record. And then he does that one song and then he leaves. And then special guest DJ, it was DJ J Ross, who was one half of one of my favorite underground rap groups, the Lone Catalysts. He's a MC based out of Columbus, Ohio, who, if I'm not mistaken, is actually a college professor. It's either at Ohio University or Ohio State, one of the two. But shout out to him. He was getting the crowd warmed up, just throwing on classics. He even threw on DJ Flex, the water dance. He had a little sprinkling of the go-go in the set, which I enjoyed. Then after he warms the crowd up, then Talib Kweli comes out and he goes through the hits. He starts off with Move Something and then just goes through the catalog. And he put on a good show as well. But during his set, he brings us this chick out. I cannot remember her name for the life of me, but she was based out of South Carolina. And she's doing a project with J. Rawls. And I got to be honest, it just really brought the show to a screeching halt because it just was the complete antithesis of the energy that was going on for the duration of the show. And then she's like, her style is like on some Lounge Lizard shit. And it just really brought the crowd down. I was like, man, you really didn't have to bring her out. But she did about 3 songs and then she left. And then, Kweli continued with his set. And then the show ended. The show ended probably right around midnight. And yeah, it was a really good show. It was humid as I don't know what. But yeah, I didn't get home till probably 1:45, like that morning. And I was just dragging ass at work because I had to be back up at 6. But yeah, I'd definitely do that again. It was good to reunite with my family, Skyzoo. Which, if I don't know if I've ever shared this with y'all, but we actually have a bit of a history. So his grandmother, believe it or not, used to actually live in my neighborhood, and every summer when he was a kid, he would come down from Brooklyn on Amtrak and spend the summer with her, and he would just run the streets with us. So I've literally known this dude since we were like 8 or 9 years old. And again, it's always a pleasure to reconnect with family like that. And that was a good time. And so now I'm gonna do a couple of childhood stories. So when I was about 14 years old, one of my homies, a guy by the name of James Bryant, shout out to Bubba. I don't know where he's at now, but he was one of my best friends in high school. And in 9th grade, he would always show up to school just like super clean. But the thing that I'll tell you the one thing that really I was envious of was the fact that he would get his hair cut twice a week. And at this point, I was getting my hair cut like every 2 weeks. And I was like, man, his hairline is always so crispy, man. And it just got to the point where I was like, you know what? I'll show him. So one weekend, while my parents were out of town, I went into their bathroom and I found my dad's old clippers, and I decided to take matters into my own hands like an idiot. And I tried my hand at trying to cut my own hair, and I tried to do a fade, and it was a very daunting task because this is my first time trying something like this, and the fact that I'm having to cut the back of my hair, like how you have your back turned to the sink, the mirror in the sink mirror, but then you have another mirror a small mirror, one of my mom's small mirrors in front of me, trying to look at the back of my head and fade it. And the fact that I had to hold the mirror with one hand and then do the clippers with the other hand, and it was just a mess because this was uncharted territory for me. I had no kind of muscle control with the clippers, and it went about as bad as you would expect. And I had to live with the results. And I went to school that next morning. I made sure to wear a ball cap on the school bus. And by the time I got in the hallway, of course you can't wear a ball cap in it while you're in the hallway in school. And I'll tell you what, when I was at Berkeley High School, there were 3 people that you did not want to get flamed by. It was the late great Antonio Simmons, it was Kendall Bryant, and it was Ricky Jenkins. And I had the misfortune of getting flamed by all 3 of them that day. I would have been fine if all 3 of them would have caught me at one time and just flame my haircut. But the fact that I got my flaming one by one through different parts of the day. Like Kendall Bryant flamed me first period walking to class. Then Ricky Jenkins flamed me during lunchtime. And then Antonio Simmons got me again. This same Antonio Simmons that flamed my back to school outfit in 9th grade. He then flamed my bad attempt at trying to cut my own hair, which, I mean, that was my own doing. So I deserved that. But still, that joker stung. I mean, especially Ricky Jenkins. You like, man, Stevie Wonder must have cut your hair in it. And man, God bless Rico Wigfall. I was in ROTC class that day, and he was my flight leader. And when I walked in, you know, I had to salute him, and he was like, "Yo, you cut your own hair?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Man, it looks good." And I'm sitting here like, "Man, you ain't got to lie to me. Yeah, I know it looks bad. I know you're trying to make me feel better, but it's not helping." But yeah, lesson learned. Then another story that happened during it was either junior or senior year. So around that time, we had just gotten to Shoney's in Monk's Corner. Now, for those of y'all that don't know, Shoney's is a restaurant that is famous for their breakfast buffet. So much so that I used to routinely cut my first period English class to go to Shoney's and have the breakfast buffet. And Icarus flew a little too close to the sun. And my English teacher, I won't say their name, they said, "Look, I want you to see me." They said, "I want you to see me after class." And now I'm just sweating bullets. And I'm like, oh boy, what'd I do? So then after class, I walked to their desk and they're like, "Look, word is that you're cutting my class to go eat at Shoney's." And I'm like, "Yeah, you got me. I don't know who found out, but there was some good intel, some good sleuthing going on." And they said, "Look, I completely understand you wanting to eat breakfast at Shoney's, because I go there literally every Saturday. I'd cut class too if I'm being honest with you." And they said, "Look, I'll make a deal with you. If you if you come back after the period is over and you bring me some breakfast, I won't mark you absent." I was like, "You know what? You got yourself a deal." And they never marked me absent, and I would routinely bring them breakfast. And yeah, bullet dodged. And that's actually, you know what? I got one more story. So this happened way later in life, but it's just something I like to do sometimes. You know, when you go into a store or a gas station and the cashier is ringing up your order, and then they say, "Would you like to contribute X amount of dollars to this charity?" And if you do, then they hand you the little paper cutout to write your name down and put on the wall. So one time I went to the Northwoods Exxon. It was probably around 10 at night, and I'm literally the only person in the gas station. It's just me and the cashier, who was a black lady she looked like she was about the same age as me. And so I get my bag of Doritos and my apple juice, and I'll make my way up to the counter. She rings my stuff up, and she's like, "Would you like to donate $1 to whatever charity it was?" I'm like, "You know what? Sure." So I give her the $1. Then she hands me the paper cutout, and she hands it to me. And she hands me the pen to write my name down. And I don't know why I just had this harebrained idea, but I took the cap off the pen, and where the space is where you write your name, I wrote down Wesley Pipes. You know, sometimes you got to check the temperature of the room. So I write that name down. I hand it to her. I grab my chips and my apple juice, and she looks down and she looks at me and she just busts out laughing. She goes, "Man," she just sucked her teeth. She said, "Man, I hate his old talking ass. He get on my damn nerve." But like, "Yep, you a dirtbag too. I see you. You have a good night." And oh man, shout out to her wherever she is. But yeah, that's going to do it for this episode of Since We Last Spoke. Make sure you like, download, and subscribe. Make sure you tell a friend to tell a friend about the podcast. Make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm at Danny Foxworth 843. There you can find all the video versions of all episodes of this podcast, as well as my baseball podcast, At the Plate with Danny Foxworth, as well as my upcoming podcast, which is Growing Up Low Country with Liz and Danny. That launches in early August. And again, thank you for listening. And this has been another episode of Since We Last Spoke. And until next time, y'all be good. Peace.